Okay, as promised, here we go with some negative values. So here's what I mean. We're still going to have a equal to 1, but now we're going to have negative b and c values. So for this first one, I've got a negative 11 for my b term, positive 10 for c. So this is just getting a little bit more interesting. I'm still going to set up my factoring normally with my two parentheses. Still filling in these four terms. That's the goal. And I still know that x times x is going to give me the x squared. So these are still x's here. Okay? I'm still looking at the c term and thinking of two numbers that multiply to get c. So two numbers that multiply to get 10. Well, my choices are, I'm just going to write them over here maybe. Let's see, over here. 1 and 10. I could do a 2 and a 5. Or again, I could switch them around. I could do 10 and 1. I could do 5 and 2. But that's about it, okay, for integers. So I have to also, first of all, get them to equal a positive 10. So the way I can get a positive 10 is I can multiply a positive times a positive, positive times a positive, or I could do a negative times a negative. Those are the only ways to get a positive number out. But I can't do a positive times a negative. So in other words, I have to have both of these be positive or both of them be negative. Both of these could be positive, both of these could be negative. And when I add the two numbers together, I have to get out a negative 11. I'm going to go ahead and circle that number there. This is what they have to add up to be. Okay? So we got to be good with our negatives here. So first of all, let's just go ahead and recognize that 2 and 5 is never going to get me out an 11. Right? I could do negative 2 plus negative 5, that'll be negative 7. I could do 2 plus 5, that'll be 7. So no, these two are not going to work. So I'm with the 1 and the 10. And I know that they have to both be positive or both be negative. So if I add two positive numbers together, I'm not going to get a negative 11. So let's try doing negatives. Negative 1 plus a negative 10. That'll do it, because negative 1 plus negative 10 equals negative 11. I could have done it the other way around. Maybe I will. I'll put it in here. Minus 10 minus 1. Now, you got to be comfortable with saying minus versus negative. They're basically the same thing. Okay? So even though I have negative 10 down here, I put a minus 10 in here. Now let's multiply it back together and make sure it works. Alright, so check our answer. X times x is x squared. Now multiply these outer terms. X times negative 1. That's a negative 1x, or a negative x. Let's do my inner terms. Negative 10 times x. Negative 10x. Negative 10 times negative 1. That's my positive 10, because a negative times a negative is a positive. Alright, let's combine these like terms in the middle. You have to think to yourself, what's negative 1 minus 10, or negative 1 plus negative 10? Right? I could put a little plus in here and turn that into a minus sign. It ends up being my negative 11. That did it. Right? And then I have a plus 10 at the end. So yes, this does indeed match the original. So here I am. This is the correct factored form for my trinomial. Alright, let's do number 2. This one's going to be a little different because this time I have a negative c value. Let's see how that changes things. Okay, I'm still setting up my parentheses. That's the best way to start these, with a equals 1. I'm going to put my a's in, because a times a equals a squared. Now, I need to think of some numbers that multiply up to get negative 12. Let's do that over here. Okay. So I could do a 1 times a 12. Maybe I'll even put a little times in here. 1 times 12. I could have done 12 times 1. Okay. I could do 2 times 6. Or 6 times 2. I could do 3 times 4. These are all getting me up to 12, or 4 times 3. And that's it. I have no other factors of 12. Okay, but I do need to notice that, look, I need a negative 12, right? So what that means, the only way for me to get that is to do a positive times a negative, or a negative times a positive. One of them has to be negative and one of them has to be positive. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and write that on here. I could do a positive 1 times a negative 12. And for me to change that here, it would have to be like a negative 1 instead, or a positive 12. Those are two different options. I could do a positive 12 and a negative 1, or switch it around with the signs. So I could do a positive 2 times a negative 6. That would equal negative 12. Or I could do a positive 6 times a negative 2, right? So I'm kind of just writing this in different ways. There's more than one way to write all this out. You kind of have to think through this on your own. And you don't even have to write it all out. But I would suggest writing it to start these, if this is all new to you. Okay, so again, positive times a negative always will have to get me the negative answer. Now I'm ready to look at the B term. Okay, B is a positive 4. So when I add my two numbers together, remember we're adding now, if I add my two numbers together, I'll put a little addition sign, I need to get a positive 4. So this first one's not going to do it. That'll give me a negative 11. And this one will give me a positive 11 if I add positive 12 and negative 1. So that's not going to do it. I'm going to jump down here to the 3 and the negative 4. Plus 3, or positive 3, plus a negative 4. That equals negative 1. That's not going to work. Positive 4, remember I'm adding to get the B term. Positive 4 plus negative 3, that's going to equal a positive 1. That's not going to work. So I'm here. Notice that 6 and 2 are 4 away from each other. This is good. So which one's going to give me the positive 4? The plus 2, or positive 2, plus negative 6? That's going to equal negative 4. That's not the one we want. Let's do the other one. Positive 6 plus negative 2. That will equal a positive 4. So this is the one we want. We want a positive 6 and a negative 2. I'm going to say that before I forget it. I'm going to write it in. Positive 6 and a negative 2, right? So let's see. Let's multiply it back together and see if we actually get what we want. Because we wanted these numbers to multiply to get negative 12, add up to get positive 4. Let's check it. A times A is A squared. A times negative 2 is negative 2A. 6 times A is a 6A. And 6 times negative 2 is negative 12. So yes, I think it's going to work. Let's combine these middle terms. Negative 2A plus 6A. That's a positive 4A. Minus 12. So, woohoo, I shouldn't have really boxed that because that's not my final answer, but it does match, yay. So this right here is my final factored form. Two binomials that when I multiply them together, I get back the original trinomial. So we did it. Alright, so that's it for when A equals 1. We're going to do one more quick video about when A is not 1 and a method that you can use to try to help with some of those tougher problems. Alright, so go ahead and turn on that next video, and then you'll be ready for the quiz.